Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Justin, and today I'm going to be recounting for you my second mushroom trip. Now, before we begin, just want to say this is for educational purposes only. Don't do anything illegal, all that good stuff. I'm just reporting on events that have already happened, and this is just for educational purposes. So, with that out of the way, let's begin. For those of you who watched my first video, I spoke about my very first mushroom high, and it was done somewhere around, I think, 2015, with some friends at one of my friends' family's cabin out in the woods next to a lake. Very nice place. Set and setting always being very important when you do these things. Again, not that I'm condoning you do anything illegal. Check your local laws before doing anything. But for me, set and setting was very important, and we wanted to continue that theme. And for my second mushroom trip, we did it at the same cabin, located in the woods. This was a year later. I believe this was around 2016. By the way, just for the recording, I guess, today's date is August 15th, 2022. Nice and early in the morning here. Now, the first trip that I took, we were trying to line it up with sunset. You take the mushrooms, and it takes a little while for them to kick in, and we were trying to get it as close to sunset as possible, and they started kicking in probably like right as the sun was going down or right after it had gone down. This time we did them just a little bit earlier to catch more of the actual sunset. So I think we probably did it like 45, 60 minutes before sunset. There was me, my buddy Aaron, Sage. We had brought in a new person to do their trip for their first time. And then there was a couple other people. And then for those of you who watched the first video, you know that Aaron and Sage were with me on my first trip. There was 4 of us. Myself, Aaron, Sage, and one other. This one, we had a little bit more people with us, which I was a little concerned about, but it was also not my first time going through this, so I was a little bit more confident, I guess would be the word. I don't know. Anyway, we took the mushrooms, again, like I said, 45, 60 minutes before sunset. We had about 6 or 7 people. I don't remember exactly. And on this one, I kind of had a little bit of a mental preload. In the first one that I experienced, I didn't have any assumptions on what was going to happen. A friend of mine had given me a breakdown of, kind of what happens, how to gauge your high. These were things that I went through before taking my first mushroom trip. I took a long time before deciding to actually do mushrooms. Wanted to make sure I was in the right space. Mentally, I wanted it to mean something. I didn't want it to just be a party thing. I'd already known that if you take them at like a rave setting and you want to have a nice time, you're going to have a nice time. It's going to enhance the setting. And so each one of these trips was it was supposed to be something more serious than that. This wasn't for play. This was to do work of sorts, right? Self-work. And in my first one, I didn't have any context for what was going to occur. I didn't have any expectations or anything like that. So I just kind of wanted to see what the mushrooms were going to show me. I just wanted to see what was going to happen. That was it. On my second trip, I did have a bit of a mental preload. I was curious because, I mentioned this in my first video. I've had friends that mentioned having like little elf friends show up, and those elf friends, like a little blue elf, would be there for each of their trips. and had been since their first one. And I never experienced anything like that on my first one. My first trip was, nothing like that. And so I always had this idea, of like, who or what is my spirit guide, as lame as that question might sound. For those of you that use tarot as a tool for, kind of expanding your awareness on certain topics and stuff, I think it's really great for that. There's another thing that's similar to it. Sorry. There's another thing that's similar to it that's called medicine cards. It's a Native American tradition where, as opposed to tarot, where you don't have like the child or the fool, and you don't have all these other archetypes. Medicine cards use animals, and the animals represent wisdoms and shortcomings. And you can do like your totem read, which is all the animals that follow you in life, or that kind of guide you. I don't know exactly how to say it right. And then of course you've always got your spirit animals, which are two. You have one to your right and one to your left that follow you through life and everything that you do. And these medicine cards can really help you if you're trying to work through a situation and you kind of need a new angle, something to think about. It's basically a tool to help you make new connections that you wouldn't otherwise without them. And they use animals as the source of, the wisdom, the natural aspects of those animals and what they bring, and how you can use that. So I went into this with this idea of like, I kind of want to preload this high with who's my spirit guide. And in the beginning, I didn't really do anything. I don't do any rituals. I literally just thought about it. I guess some people might be more intense with it, starting, from the beginning to the end, putting their intention on this idea. I didn't do that. I just kind of had this thought, and I let it out of my mind when we started. So we took the mushrooms, and we're sitting around a fire, there's a bunch of us, and some stuff started to occur around the fire, not mushroom related, a little bit, like my senses were getting heightened, my visual acuity was getting a little sharper, and so I was able to see things a lot clearer. I'm technically supposed to wear glasses for long distance sight, mostly for my right eye. But I don't do any of that. I don't really like to wear the glasses, so just a personal choice. That kind of whatever. But so one of the cues for me that the mushrooms are kicking on is starting to kick in is this visual acuity sharpening up and being able to see things a lot clearer and in sharper detail. This happened my first time. Where everything across the lake, for those of you that didn't watch the first video, it's out in the woods, thick, heavy woods, lots of trees. The cabin specifically that we were at had some of the trees cleared away, and so there was an opening down to a lake, and then across the lake, of course, it's a small lake, more trees, and our cabin led down to this small little tiny dock that went out onto the lake a little ways. And the first time I went through my mushroom high, I remember looking out over the lake and being able to see the trees on the far side super, super clearly. I could see every little detail, as if there was no degradation in my eyesight, which was really cool. And another thing, for those of you who don't know, this is something I experienced, and I thought it was going to be continuous through all of the mushroom highs, was the feeling of the waves. You hear people mention the waves, and what they mention, what it is it's this feeling of like standing in the ocean, and you have these waves rising over you, and they start small, but if you feel like you get hit by a wave, and then you get hit by another wave, and then you get hit by another wave, and as you go, the waves get bigger and bigger and bigger, and this is a sign that they're kicking in, you're getting high. That happened to me on the first mushroom trip for sure. very clearly. I immediately was like, oh, this is what everybody was talking about. That is not something that happened on my second trip. So this second time around, we're sitting by the fire. I'm not experiencing any waves. Everybody's kind of just waiting for it to kick in. We're hanging out, enjoying the fire, and my visual acuity is getting a little sharper. Pardon me. And some stuff started going on. Some interactions that were going on around the fire that were less than agreeable for me. And so I decided to remove myself from the situation. I didn't like what was happening, the energy that was kind of being portrayed or put out there. It was really off-putting, to keep it polite. So I stepped away from the fire, and my buddy Sage, he was kind of like the babysitter, always had been. He'd done this before, so he was there. He was also doing mushrooms, but he was also very aware of everyone else and puts a lot of his attention on everyone else. And so I went over and stood by Sage and kind of hung out with him for a second. And he looked at me and he said, hey, this isn't your first time anymore, so you should go and find your own space. And it immediately resonated with me. I was like, you're right, I do. I didn't like the negative energy that was happening by the fire. And so I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to go grab my pipe and my marijuana. I'm going to go sit down, smoke a bowl, and enjoy my own space. So I left Sage's side. I walked to the front of the cabin where the vehicles were, and grabbed my pipe, which I had already loaded a bowl. I didn't bring any extra weed with me, so it was just that one bowl. I didn't really want to muddle up the mushrooms too much with too much weed. I smoke recreationally, so a bowl wasn't going to affect me at the time anyway as much. It kind of just smooths things out. And Sage said, you should go find your own space. So I went, I grabbed my pipe out of the vehicle, and I looked down and I take a hit. And before I looked down to take a hit, I should say, and before I could even take that hit, I blink, and suddenly my hand, instead of 5 fingers holding a pipe, I only had 3 fingers. Well, 2 fingers and a thumb. And it looked like somebody, it looked like somebody had like cracked glass, and the glass split. And I was just immediately, like in one blink, I was, because on mushrooms you feel a little bit elated. That's typical. You feel a little bit elated. The colors start to brighten up. Things get a little sharper. I thought I was supposed to be experiencing waves eventually as I got higher and higher. This was just like blink, and vision shattered. And suddenly my hand was this weird fractally thing, and I'm holding my pipe, and I'm just like, whoa, okay, it's kicking in. All right. I better move quick. So I take a hit, and then after I take that hit, I immediately notice. So my first mushroom trip, it kind of built up. And this one was just like, when I blinked, I felt it was like snapping on really hard. And I was just like, oh, okay, so it begins. We are picking up right where we left off. I had some people say to me, your first mushroom trip is definitely your best. And it kind of dwindles down from there. As we continue, you'll kind of see why I disagree with that, at least for myself. This is very different for me. As I continued, each of my mushroom trips progressively got more intense. And this was the start of it. This was the start of the second mushroom high, and I felt no waves. It just clicked on. And suddenly, I felt like I was where I had left off on my first high. At like the peak of my first high, basically. And something interesting for those of you who watched the first video on this. I talk about having myself, like having your vision pulled back, if this is your face, being pulled back in, and where your eyes are, it just became a window. And I was looking through this like stained glass window, and it had this flower of life pattern, the full flower of life pattern, as the window itself. And each of the threads in of the flower of life were just every single color of the rainbow all at once. And so as you looked, it was just shimmering all these beautiful colors. And it was like looking through a stained glass window. And I talk about like having a window for my eyes and a window for my mind. And I could see like my thoughts when you think of an elephant or something. This was very much, a secondary window stacked on top of the other. And I was viewing them both at the same time in perfect clarity. Now this was different. When the mushrooms kicked in, I took that hit, or as they were kicking in, I saw my hand, it fractaled, I took a hit, and then I was looking around, and instead of being pulled back, I was still right there, where nothing changed. I didn't feel pulled back or anything. But that same flower of life pattern showed up, and it was embedded in all things. I wasn't looking through a window. It was these little fibers just made up everything, and they were everywhere. It was in the truck that I was looking at. It was in the ground, everywhere. And that was really cool. I really enjoyed that experience. As I walked, I kind of kept looking at everything, and I kept seeing the same winding flower of life threads within everything, the cabin, the trees, the plants. And it kept the same aspect of being every single color. And so that was, one piece of it that kind of carried over. But it was different in that it wasn't like looking through a window. There wasn't just like this bubble effect. I was actually just looking at everything, and it seemed to be woven into everything. So as I'm walking, the sun was setting, or it wasn't quite setting yet. The sun was still high in the sky. Well, not high, but it had a little ways to go before it passed down over the hillside. That's what I mean to say. And I decided to wander off into the woods, not too far, just past the first layer of trees so that nobody could see me. And I kind of just wanted to get out of sight and find a comfortable place to sit down. And I had already had an idea. I'd already scoped out a location for this. So as I was walking to this spot, I could see and feel the sun rays hitting me on my back. And as they passed me, I could actually see like the light, not just like, oh, it's bright, but I could actually see this like shimmery substance. And it came past me and would hit the plants, and it would be one color or like a multitude of colors, and it would hit the plants, and then the plants would absorb their portion of that light, and a different color would reflect off of the plants back at me. And all of the light that was hitting me felt like it was lifting me up. I literally, as I was walking, I started to lose the sensation of my muscles and impacting the ground. And so it literally felt like I was floating as I walked. And it was weird. There was this sensation of sharing the light with everything. So the light was coming in, and I could see it in its wholeness. And then as it hit the plant, it got filtered out. And then that light would hit me, and I would filter some of it out, and it would lift me up and kind of energize me. And it literally felt like I was levitating off of the light that was coming off of everything. So that lasted a little while, just until I got to where I was going to hang out. And I found this nice place to sit up against a tree. And so I sat down, got comfortable, took another hit or two off my pipe. And it was a small pipe, small glass piece, and like I said, I only had the one bowl, so I didn't sit there toking away. I basically finished the bowl and called it good, dumped it out, put it in my pocket. And when I sat down, an interesting experience happened with, it felt like I had expanded from my body, my physical body. My physical body wasn't expanded. I had expanded in like an ethereal body of sorts beyond my physical body. And so as I sat down, it felt like I was still standing up. This was weird and a little disorienting because I was, I could see through my eyes and I'm looking around and I looked down and I'm like, no, I'm very much sitting down, but I felt like I was actually standing up. And when I moved, I could feel my physical body more, but the more I held still, I felt a different body that was larger. And it was big, it was like 2-3 times my actual size, maybe more. And the probably a lot more, actually, probably closer to like 5 times my size. And the interesting thing was like the eyes were what were lined up. My larger body form was lined up, so my eyes were locked in, kind of, relative to where my physical eyes were. But as I stood there, or I sat at this tree. But as I sat at this tree, I was literally standing kind of through the earth and just kind of like in a void almost, or in standing, in space-time, but not interacting with matter. It was very interesting. I don't know how to describe it, but except for that, and I kind of soaked it up for a minute. I just kind of wanted to experience this. It was first time I'd experienced feeling larger than myself. Like if you ever like sat on your leg too long and it went numb, and then you stand up and then you're like hitting the ground and you can't actually feel the leg. This was kind of like that, but the opposite, because I couldn't feel my physical body. But instead of just that not feeling, this was like I could only feel my physical body when I moved. And as long as I sat still, I felt much larger. And I was standing up through the earth. And I wasn't standing on the earth. I was just kind of floating there, but locked in with my eyes, in the physical space-time. So after experiencing that for a little while, I was thinking, okay, I don't want to miss the sunset, so I will go back out and take a look at the sun setting and see what there is to see. And before I did this, I had a thought. I'd been letting my mind wander, and this thought came into my head of what would it be like to look into the past, and what would it be like to look into the future. And there's my inspiration for this was, I think it was the third Men in Black movie. There's this being who's like a multidimensional being, and he can see into the past and see these events. And they show him like at a stadium or something, and he can look into the future, I'm pretty sure. And he was like he's standing in this empty stadium, and he's looking out, and he seems all excited. And when the MIB members get close to him, they kind of enter into his little time warp bubble, and they can see he's watching a game that happened way in the past. So I kind of had this thought. I was like, what would it be like if I could look into the past? Like, what would that feel like? And what would that sensation be? And so while I'm standing there, I'm like, I don't really know, how do you look into the past? What direction is the past? And so arbitrarily, I pick a direction and I look. And I look to my left. And as I look to my left, I just see this trail of this etheric body of me. Literally me. And it's starts at my height, my age, just me, and it goes down. And the farther out it went, the smaller I became. And the younger, not just smaller, but younger. And so I wasn't seeing physically anything else different. The plants were still there, everything was still there. But I was looking to my left and seeing just me in younger and younger and younger stages. It didn't go all the way to me being a baby. I think part of that has to do with memory and not remembering being a baby. But I remember it went down to the point where I was a very little kid, very young, probably like 3 or 4 or 5, that time frame. And that was really cool. I stood there and I absorbed it for a minute. And as I was looking left, I noticed everybody was looking at me. And this made sense because if I was looking into the past to my left, everyone else was looking forward or to their right towards the future. And so that was kind of a cool little thing. So as I looked left, every iteration of me was just staring at me. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll join the line. And I turned to my right. And I was like, what's in the future? And I kind of hopeful, I guess, to see something like far off into the future, see me as an old man or something, but nothing. It went 3 bodies out. And yeah, that was it. It went 3 bodies out. They were still me. None of them were looking back. Everyone was looking forward. So I was just seeing the backs of my head. And these took the same blue astral form as, for those of you who watched my first video, I mentioned when we were standing around the fire kind of late at night. Smoke was blowing into the face of one of my friends. It was blowing in Sage's face, and he wasn't moving because he was high, so he's just like staring into the fire. He's like, whatever, the smoke doesn't bother me. And I had felt like I had caused it. I'm not going to get into the details. You can watch the video if you like. But I had this thought where I was like trying to interact with the smoke and redirect it, and these blue astral forms, like shadow clone jutsus, slid out of me and blocked the smoke with their hands and built a wall in accordance with my thoughts. I had literally just thought to myself, oh, I'd like to stop the wall, and literally put my hands up, and then these astral forms just whoosh, 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 slid out of me and boom, 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 and built a wall until the smoke was no longer hitting Sage directly in the face, but it went up and then over him. And so this was that same kind of etheric blue form, which I noted. This was similar to the etherical form that I felt while I was sitting down. Just this larger astral body, for lack of a better word. So after looking to my right, I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. What happens when I look up? And I didn't really have a thought for, like, what direction am I looking? Am I looking through time, or am I looking through a direction? I literally was just like, what happens when I look up? And so I go to look up, and this crazy sensation of, as I looked up, the how do I even describe this? When you have kinesthetic awareness of where your body is and space-time and where it's positioned and all this stuff, athletes have a really acute kinesthetic awareness, dancers and such. This took that feeling of space-time and my whole perception bubble and brought it flat to a 2D plane. So as I looked up, all of space-time was collapsing into a single line. And that line was very much... Oh, sorry, guys. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. So yeah, I had this experience of just everything was being collapsed into this line, and it it felt like me. It felt like myself was also being stretched at the same time. So while space time was collapsing into a line, my physical extension was like almost going vertical. It doesn't really make much sense, I know. Um, but yeah, yeah, space time was going flat, and I was going infinitely vertical, beyond basically beyond this level of space and time, and it immediately gave me the sensation that I was about to just exit my body, just straight up leave this space time realm, universe, whatever you want to, I don't know, if it wasn't just like an out of body experience kind of a thing. This was like an out of space time kind of a thing. Uh, yeah. Yeah. It wasn't just, oh, you're going to leave your body. You'll be back. You'll get to explore what's around you. No, this was very much, you're leaving your space time domain and that part of your reality. And you're about to stretch and extend into another part. So it immediately freaked me out. I had just stood up. One of the things that always gets me is, I've had out of body experiences before. One of them was done through meditation. It was my first deliberate out of body experience where I sat down with the intention of going out of body. And I did. I was able to sit down through meditation, bring myself to a state where I was pulling myself up and out of my body. I was able to look around the room, go above my house, look around the neighborhood. I got really excited, and that excitement pulled me back into my body. I've also had another out of body experience that was a spontaneous one. It literally felt like something just hit me, and I fell back into my chair and snapped. Like the first one was not force, like it's hard to say because you do force yourself, but it's force through will. You're letting it happen, but you just have to put a lot of intention into it, and that's what makes it difficult. So like the first time I went out of body, it's all intentional. You have to sit and focus, bring all of your energy, all of your chi up to the crown of your head, and you literally, through force of will alone, pull yourself out. And the second time, it was very spontaneous. I was sitting there at my chair or at a couch, and my girlfriend at the time and our roommate left the living room to go outside, and the moment they stepped past the threshold of the doorway, like literally at the exact same time that they stepped through the threshold, it felt like somebody just smacked me in the head and knocked me like straight out of my body. And it wasn't just this peaceful like, oh, you got knocked out, now you're floating around your living room. This was like, no, you got knocked the fuck out, and now you're out in space somewhere. And I got launched at light speed out into space. And so those two experiences, I had been sitting down, which was good because your body gets really relaxed and you kind of slump over. And although one of them was unintentional, I was still sitting down, so I was in a safe place. I knew I was going to be okay. During this mushroom trip, I had just stood up. I'm in the woods. There are sticks all over the place. There are bushes with sharp shit all over it. So the moment I experienced this sensation of, oh, you're about to go out of body, and not just out of body, you're leaving this space-time zone all together, it's like that primal fear kind of kicks in, and that sensation of, having this like spine, that hair raising all the way down your spine. That happened, and immediately I was like, nope, and I looked back down. And I didn't. I like started to look up again, and I was like, nope, don't even try it. Just forget about it. Forget I asked. I guess I wasn't ready to see it at that time. Which, looking back on it now, I'm like, damn, dude, you should have sat down. You should have tried that shit again. Go for that experience. But, oh well. So, as soon as that happened, I was kind of scared straight back into my body, and I was like, okay, no, let's stick with the down to earth stuff, and let's keep going with this. We don't need to go quite that high yet. And so I decided, I'll go out and I'll see the sunlight. And, because I was in the trees, everything was blocked. I couldn't see anybody, but I did have this interesting experience before I left. I should note, I had this experience where people had started to move around. People were, the mushrooms were kicking in for them too. People had gotten up and left the fire. And before I had stepped out from the trees, my vision was blocked. Nobody could see me. I couldn't physically see anybody else, but I knew where everybody was based off of auditory signals. I could hear everybody, and just on sound alone, I knew exactly where they were standing. And this was a very cool thing for me, because this was like having sonar to an extreme. This was like a continuous live feed sonar of anybody made a noise, and I knew which direction they were facing, how far away they were from me, and exactly where they were standing. And as I stepped out of the tree line to where I could actually see people, everything was confirmed. I wasn't wrong, which was super awesome for me. I was like, that was a cool ass experience. So I step out, and I'm looking up at the light, and as the sun was setting, the light that was coming down, first the sun itself it had like the Star of David, the Merkaba, within it. And as I looked at it and looking forward from it, the light that was coming down was cascading down, and it had this stacked fractal pattern, where it was just those same Merkabas just cascading from the sun down to the hillside. And it took this very cool, man, I wish I could draw it and show you guys. It was something really awesome. And while I'm looking, also, this, I saw a rainbow. There was no precipitation, by the way. This was at a time where sometimes it would rain, sometimes it would snow, up here where we were at. But still, nothing, there was no moisture in the air to really give me this rainbow. And it wasn't your typical rainbow. It was not it's not a misnomer, but it's kind of a misinterpreted word. Rainbow is Ra in bow, which is Ra is light, and in, obviously in, and then bow is actually body. So light in body. Most people think of it as a bow because of the arch, but that's not why it's called a rainbow. Rainbow is just light in body. And this was not a bow in the sense of an arch. This was like if you took the corner of a cube, and I literally just saw it was flat coming in and then tapering, it was like coming in but coming towards a point. So as if you like took a cube and just kind of dipped it in, and you just were looking at a certain piece of that cube. And I could see all the wavelengths of light stacked one on top of the other until getting to the one that reached the farthest in the corner. And they followed the rainbow colors, pattern. And it was very interesting. I don't know if anybody else saw that. but it was huge, right? You normally see a rainbow and it's just this thin little arch, and then sometimes you see like a double rainbow, and there's a little gap between the two, and then it's like, you know, two rainbows stacked on top of each other with a small gap. This wasn't like, this was just like a huge fat fucking rainbow coming in a straight line, and then tapering, you know, it hit a corner. It was like two corner pieces meeting, or two edges meeting in the corner. And yeah, that was pretty awesome. So while I'm standing around absorbing all of this, I remember like looking out over the lake, and while I was looking out over the lake, there was this large crystal dome structure that started at the edge of the actual water, and this dome just went up and all the way over the lake, and it was this like hexagonal pattern on it, and yeah, it was like it just looked like a large crystalline dome out over the lake. And along the shoreline there were these energy spires, these like bluish green energy spires coming up out of the sand that stood probably like 6-7 feet tall. And these were really interesting. I kind of wanted to go and explore and see what was there, you know, get closer to these energy spires, but I didn't. Unfortunately, I kept my distance and I just observed. And while I was there, there's this tree that I decided to go around, and kind of it blocked me. I was able to step into the tree, and it was a really big, bushy pine tree. And so you couldn't really see through it very well. And it had this spot where you could stand and view out, not directly over the lake, but kind of to the side of the lake, where there was a clearing where the water would come up if it was, if there was enough water, which the water had been receded. So there was just this like flat dirt area. I don't know how to describe that. But I remember the tree kind of blocked me from everybody else. And I was standing there, and I thought to myself, before I got to the tree, I was standing near the tree. I hadn't quite gone into the tree yet. I was standing near the tree, and I was looking out over the lake, and I was looking at this crystalline dome, and the thought again came back into my mind of who's my guide. And, you know, I kind of asked it. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. You know, I didn't want to forget, because it's one of those things you kind of get wrapped up in the moment. You might forget what you were trying to do. And in this case, I did have some intention that I wanted to go with. And so I brought that intention back, and I asked, and I was like, who is my guide? And these huge bluish arms reached down out of the sky and like grabbed me by the head and shoulders. And I mean, like earlier when I was sitting down, and I also felt like I was standing up through the earth, and I was like, oh, I'm 5 times my size. I'm big. No, these were like monstrous arms. This is like if you were this tall and compared that to your actual hand and arm. So I'm this tall standing on the shoreline, or standing close to the shore, and I'm looking out over the lake, and I'm like, who is my spirit guide? And almost like at a certain height, there's a limit that I couldn't see beyond. And at that limit, this hand came down, and as it passed this barrier, I could then see it. So it started with just as a hand, and then it became like the full arm, and suddenly it was like this thing reached down and grabbed me by my head and shoulders and just shook me gently. And I got this thought in my mind that said, you are. And it really threw me for a loop, because I mean, first I was just observing it, and I was like, oh my god, dude, what are these hands doing? You know, what is this arm, like, what is happening? And I'm staring up at it as this thing comes down towards me, and it reaches down towards me, and then it just grabs me and it shakes me and it says, you are. and it was in my own voice, and I felt connected. It was almost like it was me reminding myself that you are your own guide. Nobody is controlling you. You control yourself, kind of a thing. And that was really powerful for me because, when you're doing things like tarot or using medicine cards and stuff like that, it's just you. You're just seeing new connections. You're using it as a tool. It's a divination tool to give you insight into something that you weren't otherwise seeing. And this was one of those things where I was like, it'd be cool if I had like this wolf spirit appear to me, or some, something appear to me, even like some higher being or an alien life form or something. And it was just like, no, none of that. It's you, fool. Like, pay attention. And that was really intense for me because it kind of helped things click. Like, okay, yeah, you're right. It is just me. I make my own decisions. I'm a free being. I'm a free, sovereign individual. And, this is why when you look into your future, it doesn't go on forever. You can only see so far. You have infinite potential, and it gets actualized into one being. And maybe you can see a couple steps ahead because you know where you're at now, but even good people, get driven to do really bad things, and they don't see it coming. And, vice versa. Maybe some people turn a new leaf over, and, they thought they might be a criminal their whole life. Maybe they changed their mind, and suddenly they're a new person. So you have infinite potential that gets actualized into one person, one being, one timeline. And this was kind of like a solid reminder of that. Really, really resonated with me. And so after that happened, I was just like, okay, I'm going to think about this and just soak it all up and process. So this is when, after that happened, I went and stood into the tree. And I went really close to this tree. There was this slight opening with the branches where you can get really close to the tree itself and kind of set in with the branches. So the branches are extending out and almost like hugging you in a sense. So I find myself in this position, and I'm just breathing, just meditating. And while I'm breathing and meditating, it feels like the tree is also breathing and meditating with me. This was probably my first experience of expanding and being a part of the environment around me. Like in my first mushroom trip, I talk about seeing myself as everything, but it wasn't a feeling. It was purely a visual observation. I talked about like my kind of mental preload is I just wanted to see what the mushrooms were going to show me, but I didn't want to see anything gruesome. I didn't want to see bodies. Some people had mentioned how they saw just bodies everywhere. And I was like, no, I don't really want anything like that. That sounds terrible. But then when the mushrooms kicked in, all I saw was me in not dead bodies, but like living bodies everywhere. There was my face and body in the ground. The trees were my body. The fire was my body. In the fire pit, the logs were me. Everything. And so this was one of those, like, in that moment I saw it, but it wasn't a feeling, like, it wasn't a connected feeling. I was just observing it. This was the first time that I actually felt like me and the environment were more one, and not just one, because it's hard to say, because you get that sensation that you and everything around you is one. And I did get that a little bit in the first trip, because I felt like I was experiencing this space-time bubble. That experience of being pulled back in and viewing through the window was like, that was my window into this reality and my bubble. And I was technically all of that stuff. But it wasn't this like deep sensation of knowing. This was like that. this time was more like that. I was sitting there breathing, and it still wasn't a full deep sensation of knowing that I am that tree. Just knowing that I am kind of one with it. We were two separate entities just resonating together. And so in that way, we were one. So it still isn't quite this like, cosmic consciousness perspective of, you are the universe in its entirety. It was just kind of an inkling into that, just a hint. And so I'm sitting there meditating, breathing, and the tree felt like it was meditating and breathing, and we were kind of feeding off of each other's energy, it felt like. And it was getting late. A lot of time had passed. There was a lot of time in between here where I was just sitting and soaking up information and having thoughts and realizations and stuff. I'm kind of just touching on like the major visual aspects and other effects that occurred, but a lot of this mushroom trip was internal realizations and contemplations and stuff like that. And so this was part of that, sitting there meditating with this tree. I was probably standing there for half an hour or more. I don't know. But it was getting dark. And of course, Sage and Aaron, they were trying to keep an eye on everybody, make sure everybody got back to the cabin. And I remember before, as they were bringing people back, actually, I forgot to say this, before I went to go meditate with the tree and when I was looking out over the lake, I remember hearing other people say, that their mushroom high was coming, that they were coming down. And this seemed to kind of be a continual theme, because my first mushroom trip was like this. People were saying, oh yeah, I'm starting to come down now. And I was not. I did not come down on my first mushroom trip until after I fell asleep. This was the same. I was walking around and I'd hear people say, oh yeah, I'm coming down. I'm starting to come back too. And I was not. I had just experienced having the arms shake me, and then I decided, I'm like, okay, you guys are coming down. I'm going to go meditate with this tree. So anyway, do the meditation. My friends are calling back to me saying, hey, time to come inside. And this thing would always happen with Aaron and Sage, where they would die laughing when they entered the cabin. Sage had all these, it was just patterns and stuff, but Sage had all these like arrowheads that were displayed in picture frames and stuff. And they would make really cool fractals. Plus the tiling on the floor was this intricate tiling. And Aaron would always get super, happy and excited when he'd see these patterns, and he would just break down laughing, and then Sage would laugh, and it was just this vicious cycle of the two of them would literally just fall to the ground laughing. And so they're like calling out, trying to get everybody into the cabin, and they're laughing, and I decide to turn and look. Now, my back was to the tree, so I've got this large tree trunk that's there, and I shouldn't have been able to see them from where I was at, but I turn over my shoulder and I look, and it felt like as I looked, the tree branches just opened up and allowed me to see through the tree and see my friends, and I could see them in perfect clarity, fully unblocked. And then as I was like, oh, okay, yeah, they're just having fun, and I looked back and I could feel the tree close its branches again. And this thought came into my mind, like, did that tree just move with me? Because I know we were breathing together, but did that tree really just move with me? And so I didn't want to forget that moment. I wanted to remember it. And so the next day, I planned the next day that I was going to come out and scope out that spot. And, I finished I didn't let this thought disturb my actions in the moment. So I continued to relax And then I left the tree. I went inside and eventually went to bed. My high did continue with me for most of the night, just as it had the time before. And after I woke up the next morning, feeling refreshed, I went out to that tree and I decided to stand in that same exact spot and see if I could see the cabin from where I had been standing. And so I stood there, found a spot exactly where I was standing, kind of looked around, breathed for a minute, and then I turned and looked to my right, tried to look through the branches of this tree. I couldn't do it. The tree was thick and the branches were tightly packed, and I couldn't see the cabin. It was totally covered. I could see like little pieces through the cabin, but I could not see the whole thing as clearly as I had the night before. And I was like, well, that's kind of strange, because I know that like that sensation of, oh, the things around you are breathing, and a lot of people chuck this up to, you know, you're aware of like the blood vessels in your eyes pulsating and pumping blood, and that's what gives you that breathing effect. I am not certain. I feel pretty certain that that is not what this was. This did not give that sensation. The tree, I could not see through it. Just plain and simple. I couldn't. And the night before, I very clearly did. I looked, I felt the tree open its branches and move with me. And when I looked, I could see directly, no obstructions, all the way to the stairs that lead up to the cabin. I could see the cabin patio and the doors and everything the night before. And this morning, I could not. It was all very much blocked. And that was an interesting thing for me. And it really kind of threw me off, you know. Took me a minute to figure out what was going on. And yeah, I'm looking around, and I'm like, I tried it a couple times. I kept looking, I kind of ducked and stood a little taller and stood a little shorter and tried to move around and see through this tree. Absolutely couldn't. So anyway, it was all an interesting thing. I don't know what to make of it. This is what I experienced. Still kind of sticks to me to this day as a unexplainable thing. I've heard some similar interesting things. For those of you who are familiar with Terence McKenna, he talks about similar things. I'll give you a quick example of one of them, where he was out in the woods or wherever he was at, on a rather heavy dose of mushrooms, and he had an experience with like a crab or something while he was sitting and meditating, just being one with the universe. This crab came along and like cleaned the dirt out of all of his fingernails. And then he had another one where he was talking about washing dishes in the water, and he was like, he's trying to explain this to someone because he had this experience where he was really, he's high and he's going to clean this pot, and it's dirty because he's been cooking in it, of course, and he like takes the sand and he cakes it on, and then he just rinses it off. And while he's doing this, he's feeling very at one with nature, and as he rinses it off, it just comes totally clean. And then he's trying to explain this to someone who hadn't gone through the experience, and he takes him over and he's like, no, look, it's, you just rub the dirt into it and put the dirt on it, and then you rinse it away and it's totally clean. And then, he's saying at this part, at this time he's sober, and it doesn't work. And, he gets this sensation, this guy is looking at him like, you poor fool, what is wrong with you, kind of a thing. And this kind of felt like that, I've never told anybody. You'll be the first people. But yeah, it was kind of like that. I was, in resonance with this tree, and I could feel it, and I felt like it could feel me. And when I moved and thought, it moved with me in accordance with my thoughts. And I don't know how else to explain it. It was a weird one. But anyway, yeah, that is the conclusion to my second mushroom trip. Thank you all for taking the time. If you've made it this far, please, I hope you've gotten something from it. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any experiences like this, or just share some of your own experiences. I think we all grow from hearing other people's points of view and kind of sharing our experiences with one another, which is the purpose of all of this. So thank you all so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and stay positive, stay open, and I'll see you next time. Bye.